just wonderful.
Like I said, it is my pleasure to introduce Dirk Lohan. Now, it is rare that I get to say with absolute certainty that I know you have all enjoyed an architect's work before, but I know that because you are all currently enjoying Dirk Lohan's work. Of course, Dirk is the architect who put together our incredible museum, turning this into an empty warehouse space that it is now a beautiful boutique museum of Chicago's maritime history. And you will notice through this talk that maritime history is something that has always greatly influenced Mr. Lohan. Now, Dirk Lohan left his native Germany to begin his architectural studies at the Illinois Institute of Technology under the tutelage of his grandfather, Mies van der Rohe. Dirk Lohan returned to Germany to finish his studies at the Technical University of Munich in 1962. In the same year, he immigrated to the United States and worked closely with Mies on such projects as the new National Gallery in Berlin, the IBM office building in Chicago, and the Toronto Dominion Center. Dirk Lohan is a fellow of the American Institute of Architects. Under his leadership, his firms produced an impressive portfolio of design solutions, including such projects as the McDonald's headquarters campus, the Shedd Oceanarium, the Adler Planetarium Sky Pavilion, and the expanded Soldier Field football stadium, as well as, of course, many other cultural and commercial, national and international building projects. Mr. Lohan has long held the belief that successful architecture must respond not only to economic restraints, but also to the larger social and physical conditions. During the past years, Dirk Lohan has practiced and promoted the tenets of this philosophy. Looking to the future, Mr. Lohan's convictions are even more relevant today due to the rapid changes in technology, the growing importance of environmental concerns, and the impact of globalization on the life and work of all people. Please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Mr. Dirk Lohan.
Thank you, Jane. Well, that was quite an introduction. All these wonderful things that somebody did. But I'm also very pleased and proud that this little museum has now been around for, I think we're in our second decade.
Just about 10 years at this location.
Yeah. And I remember coming here to this building and scoping out if we can make a museum exhibit. And because we were next to the river, I thought, well, at least we have a maritime relationship. So, but when Madeline asked me some time ago, several months ago, if I would give a talk, I think she was inspired by these pictures by Josh Lipnick, who traveled around the Midwest and took pictures of buildings relating to the Great Lakes, to the rivers and so on. And I thought, oh my God, I have never thought seriously about maritime architecture in my life. I'm an architect for many years now, all my life, but the maritime aspect is nothing I ever heard about in university or during my studies. We talk about residential architects, commercial architecture, and that sort of thing, but maritime was not mentioned. So I did a little research for my own enjoyment and hopefully yours tonight about this topic, and we will see how it goes. And I'd like to start now. Hold it. I can do that myself. Why is it not working?
There we go.
Okay. Okay. I'd like to start with what I consider to be the most important plan of Chicago, which is Daniel Burnham's plan, 1909, over 100 years ago. And the commercial club at the time sponsored it together with his partner, Bennett. They developed this plan of the city of Chicago as a vision they had how Chicago should develop, because they realized that at this place, this flat land here, this marsh on the edge of the lake will become a big city. And they were right, of course. And they developed a plan which is largely based on what we in architectural terms call sort of the understanding and the philosophy of the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris, meaning classical architecture and formal arrangements, a little bit taken after Paris to look a little more like Paris or something like it. But what I think is the major contribution of this plan that came out of it for Chicago's development is that the whole lakefront was designated parkland and to be kept for the people, open and free forever. And I think that's the greatest achievement of this plan, because there is, to my knowledge, not another city in the United States or maybe even in the world where you have a lakefront of 45 miles long that is parkland and accessible anywhere and everywhere to the people of the town. That's a really great achievement of this plan. What you see here, let me point a few things. This obviously is not Navy Pier, but it is their idea of building out into the lake some piers that frame the center of the town and the harbor and Grand Park, and Michigan Avenue is this street here. This is, of course, before the Art Institute was built, but you see the suggestion to put some major buildings there, but public buildings, not private commercial developments. And this struggle of keeping it private and not private, public, is still going on. I will tell you a few of my assignments over the years where I had to basically defend and deal with the same issues. And you all have heard about the plan to build a space museum at the museum campus a few years ago, and that the Friends of the Park fought it and filed lawsuits, and it was eventually prohibited because it would have been a private institution. Anyway, the river, by the way, I think that's an important thing too, is this line here comes out into the lake. And as we, more or less, it's in the same spot. Navy Pier is a little more south of what this was proposing, but it goes out here. On this side, that has never been built, but the museum campus is in this area, and the Adler Planetarium is here. The Shedd Aquarium is there. It's mixed field used to be on this bit of land. So I admire this plan very much because of its vision and the audacity that these guys had over 100 years ago to put this out, publish it in a really wonderful publication with renderings and colors and whatnot. And it caught the attention not only of the Chicago City Council in those days, but actually generations of architects who had to deal with Chicago have been looking at this plan. Whenever we do something, the word, look at the Burnham plan, whether that's a good idea or not. The other thing that's very special about the plan that was developed is that the parks were located in the city, surrounded by residential neighborhoods, and often connected with wide boulevards with median strips of, as you all know, if you go from sort of west of Chicago from one park to another, there are these boulevards you can drive And it's really grand and wonderful. Anyway, now here, let's go. So now I talked to Daniel Burnham, but now you're going to see a little bit more of his day that follows this plan I just showed you to some degree, but that it also has played a major role in my life. I have designed expansions for the Shedd Aquarium, the Oceanarium for whales and dolphins, etc. The Adler Planetarium, the Sky Pavilion, the circle that you see here around it. The expansion of Soldier Field around 2000 and 2002. And then maybe almost most importantly, the museums hired me to study a better traffic solution for the museum campus. And we came up with the idea to relocate the northbound lanes of Lakeshore Drive to the west of Soldier Field as it is now. It was done and implemented, and the museum campus is much more and really a campus. You can walk on it and you can even cross the street without taking a life in your hands. So that has been a major activity over the years for me. And now here you see the Adler Planetarium, the Sky Pavilion wrapping around it on the water side to the east. This is the Shedd Oceanarium that I forget, it's 30 years ago that I did this. This is a view of the inside of the shed. And what I want to point out here is that it seemed to me when we were asked to do this, that to put most of aquariums that you go and visit as museums, they have a pool and the visitors sit all around. There are several of them like this. And I thought that was a little strange when you're trying to show whales and dolphins. These are big animals. And so I decided to put the pool on the windows overlooking Lake Michigan. So when you're viewing the display or the performance of the animals in the water, you're sort of, you can imagine you're sitting on the edge of an ocean, which is obviously not the case. But this picture shows pretty much what I had in mind, that the water surface continues from the pool into Lake Michigan and out into the distance. The only thing that's framed and visible visually are the frames for the window wall and the columns on the outside. This was also a wonderful project. Now, not only am I an architect, I also have another passion, and that is sailing. I've been sailing all my life. When I came to Chicago in '62, as you heard earlier, one of my first thoughts was, my God, I can go sailing here. Because in Germany, where I came from, my family, we lived several times, always near some water or lake. So I learned to sail on small boats as a kid, even built a boat when I was 10 years old and waterproofed it with hot tar. Got all my clothes black. But this is my boat, Hilaria, 55-foot yawl with 2 masts. And I bought it in the middle of the 90s, or beginning of the 90s. And my thought was, and I did that I'd like to re-travel Columbus's route to discover America. So I did exactly that. I took this boat from here through the Great Lakes, down the Hudson River in New York, and from Newport to Bermuda, and sailed over to Europe, and ending up in Portugal and then later to the southern tip of Spain near Gibraltar, and from there to the Canary Islands and back to the Bahamas. And what you will see here is my plotted courses. Actually, I did 2 transatlantic trips. One in 72 with a friend of mine on a 62-footer, as a crew member and navigator. In fact, I had become fascinated with celestial navigation and taught myself most of it, but I also took classes at the Adler Planetarium. And it was always very interesting. There were as many people or more for these classes. And later I was asked by the director of the planetarium to teach the celestial navigation class. And I always looked at all these people that came to do this when celestial navigation was going out of fashion, and GPS and, you know, beacons, beams, and was what everybody was using to find their way. And I said, how many of you want to circumvent the Earth by boat? Almost every hand went up. And I know that none of them have done it. Not even me. But then in the mid-90s, I bought this Hilaria boat that you just saw, and I took a trip by myself, I mean, with my crew and my people. And we went to Bermuda and then to the Azores, which is a group of islands off the coast of Europe near Portugal, not close to Portugal, but sort of like Bermuda to the United States. The Azores are similar to Europe. And then down to Spain. And then I took the trip across back, and this is the lower track here. And this is my actual plotting on the sea chart that was on the boat. Now I had worksheets, of course, every day plotting the position, but I took it like this. So that's why I showed you. So that is my, shall we say, combined knowledge or interest in the maritime world and in the architectural world. I discovered early on, even at the time I was still using celestial navigation, that along Lake Michigan and everywhere in the Atlantic, there were lighthouses. And they're still around today, although hardly anybody needs them anymore. This is probably the most famous one of them all in near the southern coast of England, Great Britain, in the English Channel. It's the, what is it called? Now I'm sorry, the name escapes me now. What? Eddystone. That's it, Eddystone Lighthouse. And it was designed in the English Channel because that is a very narrow water between France and England. And if you go to Europe from America in those days, 150 years ago, that was quite popular, and there were many boats going that way. And there's some shoals underwater that the charts were not yet updated the way they are today. So they needed a lighthouse, and they had an engineer design this particular lighthouse because the previous ones that were there always fell apart because it's in the water, in the sea, salt water, and storms hit this thing and toppled it over. And the engineer's name was Smeaton. He is sort of an iconic figure in engineering. He designed this lighthouse with stone and shaped it, as you can see, like the trunk of a mature oak tree, bigger on the bottom and then thinning towards the top, etc. But in addition to that, the drawing on the right is showing you the large quarried rocks that were fitted and chiseled with slats and points to fit into each other, like sort of your fingers, to be fixed and couldn't move because this was underwater. And that worked very well. And it withstood the storms of the sea for over 125 years. So that lighthouse was very famous and was sort of was copied and emulated around the world, wherever you found lighthouses. The other thing that this Smeaton engineer did, he worked with cement and found a way of developed sort of hydraulic cement that would set up underwater to be solid. That was when this tower was done, and it became not only an influence on lighthouses, but also on high-rise buildings and other structures that we architects do with hydraulic cement. So I, out of respect for that invention, I have this picture here. But here's another picture of a famous lighthouse. Lighthouses are very much maritime architecture. That's the Fastnet Rock, not too far from Plymouth, England, on the southwestern corner of Ireland, where the English Channel begins, and you go out into the open Atlantic Ocean. There's this rock, and obviously in the early days before lighthouses, this was a danger at night. The navigators of these ships didn't often see, or in a storm, they could be blown on this rock, and that was the end of the story. So that lighthouse was developed very early on and was always maintained and doctored over. And I am very, very proud that I myself have traveled with my boat around this thing. And it also is in the memory of many Irish immigrants to America. That was the last bit of land they saw of Ireland, and it was nicknamed the Irish Teardrop. Now, I'm spending a little time talking about lighthouses because they are probably the most notable maritime architecture. And there is a certain style and a certain need and a functionality about a lighthouse that you can't escape. You need to develop some height so it's visible over the curvature of the earth or the sea from, I don't know, 50 miles away on bad nights. And this is the Chicago Lighthouse, which was done in, see what year that was. That's the sort of thing I can always remember. 1893. 1893, the Chicago Lighthouse. It then, in the middle of the 1900s, it was registered as a national landmark and eventually even as a Chicago landmark. But there is a plaque in City Hall in Chicago that is in front, is with this lighthouse picture, and it labels it as the spirit of the waters. Today, this lighthouse is more a sentimental attraction. Hardly anybody needs it. Of course, since this still works and shines light, you can say, let's go for it. Let's not run it over, but go by it, and you're inside the breakwater. But any of the technology today will guide you through even without the lighthouse. It's that simple and that wonderful. The only thing is if your ship ever runs out of a battery or you can't use the technology, it would be nice to know how to read the stars and how to measure the altitude of a star and then calculate the lines of position, because what these star sites give you is a line of a position that you can make on the chart, and then another one at an angle from another star, and where they intersect is where you are, where you have just been. That's how that works. Here is an interesting one that is in Detroit, and I like it because it was designed by a famous engineer of industrial buildings from Detroit. He did almost all the major automobile plants in Detroit, and his name is Albert Kahn, Khan. And it was built in 1930, and it's a very nicely proportioned building in stone, as you marble. I don't know which stone exactly it is. But I'm fond of it, and I know Albert Kahn is probably the best known architect / engineer of industrial buildings. I'm sure some of you have heard of it. Now, the average lighthouse looks like this. It's a little bit of a tower. This one is the Sandpoint Lighthouse in Escanaba, Michigan. And the light tower is not very high. And there's a house attached to it. For what reason is there a house? Well, the light keepers had to live there. They were hired permanently. And every day they had to turn it on at night when the sun goes down and turn it off in the morning and make sure they don't malfunction or that sort of thing, because even that was still an ancient technology in comparison to what we do today. Here's another one that, by the way, these are pictures from your show. In Mackinac City, the old Mackinac Point Lighthouse. Also, I've seen it many times. It's just a little bigger. It looks to me like there are two light keepers in this house, maybe, for families living there. It's almost overdone, but anyway, beautiful. And they, because of the Midwestern landscape surrounding Lake Michigan, Lake Huron, everything is pretty flat. These towers were not very tall. This is not a mansion or villa. This is also a lighthouse. Can you believe it? Does anybody know where that is? Yes. Wow. Amazing. I'm impressed. Who did that? Who was that knew that? Anyway. Oops, I went to hold it here. I just think it's interesting. Grosse Pointe was built in 1873 and was registered as a National Historic Place in 1939. And it's still there today. And the Grosse Pointe shoals outside Evanston are the reason they needed this lighthouse there to tell people, don't come too close, stay away. Because there was a major disaster that happened there. The Lady Elgin disappeared and 300 people died in a storm. And we in this museum have an exhibit of the Lady Elgin as well. The light keepers were originally, yeah, well, they were always hired, but I don't know, maybe even by the city of Evanston. But nowadays they're hired by the National Coast Guard since 1939. And the building is also a landmark. So you can see they are all appreciated. But doesn't it look more like a villa or a mansion in some lake forest than a lighthouse? This is an interesting story too. It's an image from your exhibit. It's the Florida Tropical House that was built and erected to be viewed and visited by Chicagoans as a house of the future, modern house, for the 1934 World's Fair. What was it called?
Century
Progress, yeah. Country Progress. And it was sitting on what later became the airport Mixfield. And after World's Fairs, buildings had to be torn down and removed because they were temporary exhibits. And this was the destiny of this house. It was built just to be viewed and admired and as a new way of living, maybe. But a developer in Chicago called Bartlett had a plan, and he saw this house and 3 others that he purchased before they tore it down. He put them on a barge and floated them to Indiana Dunes at Beverly Shores. And that house and the others have been re-erected in Beverly Shores, and they are also protected now because the area is a national landmark, national park. They're protected. I like this house very much as an architect, particularly maybe because of its color that you don't see in this area very often. It looks to me very much like Florida.
Is this the reconstructed house that we're seeing?
Yes, reconstructed, but it's the same material. And I can't tell you if they repainted it. I'm sure they did after they put it together. Because putting something like this on a barge, there must have been movement then. Right.
Does someone live there now?
Yes, yeah, I know where it is. We have friends in Beverly Shores, and we've been by the shoreline there, and there's that house. And this looks also like a mansion, but it's in Gary, a beach house. So it's probably the most solid looking beach house or house in Gary. I'm sorry. It's wonderful right on the beach overlooking Lake Michigan. And it has a formal language of architecture, call it Italianate a little bit. And then the view, when on a rainy, bad day, you can go inside undercover and be there while it's raining or whatever. And you still see the beach, shoreline, and Lake Michigan horizon. Beautiful experience, in my opinion. I have never been there, but I'm so intrigued that I'd like to stop by there one day. Because it's really beautiful. It's another one of your houses. This one, I looked at it and I looked at it and I said, what is this, a prison or what? Looks so forbidding, so closed in, small windows and all masonry, like a little fortress. Well, let us go around to the other side, to the water side. This is the land side. The water side looks like this. Completely crazy. But that the architects that did this had a good time. It seems. Just follow me. Now, you see the Chicago River and Marina City here, and I want to tell you something I learned looking and researching for this talk, that Chicago owes its existence to the Chicago River. And the Chicago River owes its current appearance to the city of Chicago. And I love that because it's absolutely true. The reason Chicago is where it is, because there was a river coming into Lake Michigan that had a relatively easy connection to the Mississippi drainage area, region. And just where the Chicago River, the South Branch, and the Des Plaines River came together, there was a portage. And the portage was simply that those early explorers and Frenchmen that came here, like Père Marquette, they were coming by canoes and paddled along. They were basically flat-bottomed boats. They didn't have a keel. Why? Because very often the rivers were very shallow, and the shallower it is, the better you can paddle this thing, other than taking it over your head or shoulder and carrying it over the portage. Portage comes from porting. That was the portage which later became Mud Lake, in this was called that way. And because of that relatively only 5-6 mile portage, so just imagine you're paddling along the river and you have to get out. What you have in the boat, it all has to be carried. The boat has to be lifted and walked over land usually through marshland. And I read stories where the voyageurs, the original people that came, the Frenchmen and so on, they sank into the marsh up to their hips and had to carry the stuff. So it was a nightmare. No wonder that even these early people were thinking, we got to dig a canal here. We got to connect these waters so we can go with our boats continuously. And that portage was known to the Indians, the native population. And somehow these voyageurs heard about this, that there is a big river further down there that way, the Mississippi River. And of course, the French people wanted to have access to the town in the south. What's it called? At the bottom of New Orleans, I'm sorry, or Leon, yeah. From Montreal to there and via Mackinac. That became the connection. And when these canals were built with the help of hardworking immigrants, I heard stories about most of the Irish worked on digging these canals, but the immigrants, the early ones. And that this was a fantastic improvement, which made Chicago become this great big transshipment point in North America, where you can connect the two sides of drainage. What we call that a continental divide. That portage was a continental divide, where the water flowed to the east via the lakes and to the west via the rivers to Mississippi. I find that fascinating. And what's also interesting is that Bertrand Goldberg, the architect of Marina City. On the river, he developed these buildings with a little marina on the bottom, where if you had the wherewithal, you could have your boat docked, serviced, filled up the gas tank, what have you, and made it, called it Marina City. I told you about the lighthouse in Plymouth, in England, that this engineer Smeaton developed this hydraulic cement. And these buildings also are all concrete. The columns, the foundations, the cantilevered balconies, and the roof slabs. Everything is concrete. And by that time, this hydraulic concrete or cement had been widely used and has been used here too, particularly near the water. I hear in the profession of engineers and structural engineers, now the Marina City is about 60 years old. Because I remember when they built it, I was here already. There is a little concern that all this concrete has to withstand the temperatures, the winter, the snow, the rain, and the water, and that sooner or later, over time, some failure of the concrete may set in. Hasn't happened yet that I know of, but Bertrand Goldberg, by the way, also did River City, the development on the near south side on the river, on the south. This is going south the river. And even there he put some harbor facility in for private little boats that could come in there and get serviced and stay overnight and whatnot. Bertrand Goldberg, by the way, was an interesting man. I knew him also personally a little bit, and he knew my grandfather, Mies van der Rohe. When Mies came in 1937 for the first time to Chicago to look around this city that had made him an offer to become the head of an architecture school at Illinois Institute, Bertrand Goldberg was here to receive him. And he spoke German because he had been a student under my grandfather in Germany's Bauhaus, the famous design school that, I don't know if you've heard of it, but that's had an influence. And so Bertrand received his old professor very nicely and very well. Now, in recent years, I'm very happy to show and say we have finally learned to treat our river like a maritime product, and the street edges and the river edge has been improved tremendously. The river walk. This is the one between LaSalle and Clark Street on the river. And that is where, from what I've read, the location of where the Eastland tipped over and over 800 people disappeared. But this is done sort of a little bit like theater seating, so they can have events there or performances in the water, and thousands of people can sit there. It's very nice. And the architect that did that is a woman architect, Carol Ross Barney, who I don't know if you've heard the name, but she's quite well known. She did also that McDonald's restaurant between Ohio and Ontario. Rock and roll?
Previously routed.
Yeah, she designed that. Now I'm switching back to me. This is the Centennial Fountain on the Chicago River. I was master planning the Streeterville area for a development company that was the successor to the Ogden Harbor. What? Yeah, the Ogden Company. And I worked with the Metropolitan Water District, and one day they said, "Hey, we should commemorate the reversal of the Chicago River. And would you design us some memorial fountain, something?" So this is what we came up with. It's a big attraction for all these tourist boats, because that arch that shoots over the river usually loses some water and you get wet. So you will remember that you went through the Centennial Fountain. But the design idea behind it is, this is the view from the river edge looking into the city. You see the central round circular pool on top. That's sort of the sky where the water comes from. And then it flows into to the right, to the east, to the left, to the west. And these levels of these lines that you see there are the lakes, the Great Lakes, the Lake Michigan, Lake Huron, Lake Erie, and then into the Hudson River. And on the west, the Des Plaines River, the Illinois River, the Mississippi River, and the Caribbean Sea. And then they flow together again, and that's the Atlantic down here. That's the symbolic that I made this. I had ideas to put a wonderful sculpture in the middle that does exist, but the Art Institute said no. So maybe one day somebody comes and says we should have put a fountain, a sculpture there. Anyway, I enjoyed that very much, and it's here you see what I talked about. The arch loses a little bit of water as you go through it, and it makes you wet for a minute or two. But the tourists seem to like that. And the reason I made that arch was twofold. Number one, I wanted to, because as a sailor, I like the idea that you symbolically show that you're entering the city, an arch, like the Arc de Triomphe sort of thing. You know, that was one reason. The other reason was that I had observed that for years and decades, the south side of the river edge there was never improved. It was all just a wasteland. You couldn't walk there properly and so on. And I said, why don't we shoot water over there so the city will say, well, we got to do something. And it worked like a charm. Very quickly, a year or two later, they came and improved the south side of the river. So that was part of the success. Now, maritime architecture. I found this picture and it intrigued me so much that I wanted to show it to you. This is in Portugal. It is a former saline harbor where they were producing salt from seawater. Ancient methods, whatever they did, I don't know. And they hired a Danish architect with the name Mast, M-A-S-T, very appropriately. And he designed these stilts houses to be built in the water because it's shallow, that harbor. And there are, I don't know how many of these villas that you can rent or buy. It's still in development. It's brand new. It's not yet very established. And here's a view from the inside of one of them looking at your neighbors. It's a sort of unique little township. Talk about maritime architecture. And where? Oh, in the water?
Yeah.
I think so. probably Portuguese geese. Anyway, now then I found another town called Stillsville. Anybody ever heard that?
Yeah.
This is in southern Florida, at the tip of southern Dade County. There is a shallow area of the ocean, miles of it. And somehow the government allowed people to go there and claim a piece and put some piles in and build themselves a house. And you see some here. This was done in the 20s and 30s. And well, the one here in the front was what I read. I don't know this myself, but I find it interesting how architecture has related to the water here. But that was a restaurant and a club where alcohol was served without license because it wasn't on the land. And it was called the Bikini Club. And if women came in bikinis, they got free drinks. Now, a famous building by Mies van der Rohe. You may have seen images of that. It's the Farnsworth House in Plano, Illinois. It's also on stilts. So you could call it, creates its own stilt village. The reason it is on stilts is that the land it is on is next to the Fox River and is a floodplain, an officially designated floodplain. And you don't want to build a house in a floodplain. So Mies raised this house 5 feet about up, so you would be safe all the time. And the elevation that was recorded as the highest ever on the Fox River flood was marked up on a nearby bridge, just a few hundred yards from there. There's a bridge. And that's how this was determined. It is really just a weekend house. It's simple. It's not very large, but it's very famous. People come from around the world, and it's now a museum. And here is a view from the inside out to the river. You see the river behind these trees. And can you imagine that floods up 10, 12 feet higher in the spring after the strong snowfall winter when all this melts? And part of the problem has been that the modern times, in recent years, more and more floodplains have been built upon, parking lots, and they paved them. And then the water can't go in the earth anymore. And that's why the flood of the Fox River has gone higher and higher, and rather than stay where it was recorded. And in the 90s, the house was flooded 5 feet inside the house, this high, water. Most of the windows broke, and it was owned by a friend of mine, Peter Palumbo from London. He was also an art collector, and he had a wonderful portrait of Liz Taylor by Andy Warhol. That fell off the wall and flooded away. And I am convinced some farmer has it in his barn in downstate Illinois. And here you see the sort of annual occurrence when the floodplain fills up. This is the way it's supposed to be, you know. But obviously they had prediction that it would go higher because they hung the drapes, or they curled up the drapes and all of this that way. But so even a house like that, it's pure architecture, has a maritime relationship, must have it. This, you probably know what that is, the U-505 at the Museum of Science and Industry. I was hired to design this display. And the structure is a special underground building because it's a submarine. We put it in the earth. Now I come to something I did for the Chicago Maritime Museum some years ago. There's a piece of property that's outlined here in red on the south end of Polk Park, which is between Lake Point Tower, which would be on the left, not in the drawing, and Navy Pier on the right, that gray area. That's Polk Park. And on that end is an open area that I thought would be a perfect place for the Maritime Museum, the Chicago Maritime Museum. We negotiated, talked with the Corps of Engineers who own it, and it became very clear that we were a brand new museum and a new organization and didn't have the resources to buy and do and build what I designed here, which this is my sketch. And I chose to have the roof hanging on cables from masts to make it look a little bit like a boat, because it's next to the water and it would look like a boat from a distance. And here you see the real picture. It looks like it was built, but it wasn't. It's a rendering. Yes. Yeah, I have to find out how they found the money for this. But anyway, all of this would have been a project in the $40–50 million, and we just didn't have the money. And I hope the day will come when we can find a more attractive location in the city than this one, because it's very hard to fill in a room here or get the tourists that come downtown from out of town to go here. Very few people do that.
Yeah.
And this is an inside view of what it would have been like, and here's the view from the park looking to the water. It has big, flat, hanging, cantilevered roof. And I want to end with something that happened in the last few days. I have worked over the years several times on Navy Pier for this and that. So we did the Children's Museum, and I made proposals, then that didn't get hired, and that sort of thing. And lately I've been receiving requests for a proposal to submit concepts for what to do at the east end of Navy Pier. You see the east end here in the lake. There's a large auditorium there in the round shape, and then there are the exhibition halls. And the Navy Pier has learned that despite 8.5 million visitors annually, few people venture all the way to the east end, because it's almost a mile-long walk and back. And they are now looking for ideas what to do on the east end to populate and make it attractive for people to go there. Well, I'm not yet ready to discuss what I think should be, but maybe there ought to be a little tramway or a bus line going back and forth. But I think this would be a perfect space for our growing and Chicago Maritime Museum. And I already talked to the director whom I know, and she immediately understood, said, that's a great idea. But that was only a few days ago, so it's not yet a contract. So, but there will be other people asked, of course, other big businesses maybe. But I think a museum like this, 3-4 times the size that we have, is possible. And there's enough resources in this city with the right effort that we could probably do this. But
A lot of people don't know much about Chicago Maritime.
no, I agree. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe over these exhibit halls there. They have big girders that don't look so. There is a hotel, yes, 225 rooms.
Yeah,
It's a boutique hotel.
even the mayor doesn't know. And the Cook County president, Winkle, I asked him yesterday. He doesn't
Cook
know.
County who?
President of the Cook County.
Preckwinkle?
Yeah.
Oh,
I asked him yesterday in the conference.
Oh, that's funny.
Documented museum is everything.
that's very funny. She doesn't know that. Okay. Well, anyway, this concludes my remarks. I'm making this proposal to whoever is part of the museum here. I would like to meet with you to talk about this, brainstorm this a little bit and see if this makes some sense for the organization as well as for the location.
Used to be at North Terminal.
North Pier.
North Pier Terminal, thank you.
Yes,
Then I think we had to move for some reason. I think we couldn't afford it or something.
yeah, well, but yeah, and that building has been developed for other purposes. There are lots of restaurants now and so on. But I mean, maybe we can even combine this with a museum and something else. I think there should also be at this end a really nice, unique, special restaurant. I don't know what, that people want to go there. But anyway, to be discussed. So I would be happy to answer a few questions if you have any. Anybody?
Questions, please. Got one over here.
Yeah.
Oh, I work on the river, so I pass by every day and I sometimes talk
You
about
walk,
you.
walk,
so I'm
you
so-
walk where?
I work on a boat. I'm an architecture docent on the river, so I'm honored to meet you. I go by the fountain and it was obviously it was off for a few years. Were you involved in fixing it? Or
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes, and I
so happy that it's on.
gave a talk at the reopening.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
We have some questions online too, which Jim are pulling up, but in the meantime, Tony?
Yes, sir. I'd like to ask, talked about the hydraulic cement concrete.
Yeah.
In Roman times, they had hydraulic concrete. And is there a difference between that and the modern hydraulic concrete?
I wish I could answer that question. I just don't know. But the Romans may have known something that the people in England didn't know yet. So, I mean, I don't know the answer to that question.
Online, yes. What sculpture should sit on the fountain? You're talking about where.
Oh, I forgot what it was. It was a contemporary artist, I think. Who was it?
Is it Virginia from our studio here?
I know Virginio very well. I hired him several times for something in my buildings. For instance, on the IBM building, where the Langham Hotel is now, there is a sculpture that I didn't select, but it's the one where with people with umbrellas. You may have seen it. They placed it under the overhang of the building. So these guys with umbrellas are in the dry. And I said, that's ridiculous. They have to be out in the open because they have umbrellas. And I went to the Landmarks Commission and made a plea, and they allowed it, and so we relocated it. Yes.
How much influence does the Burnham Plan still have today? And are the limitations that you believe you have to deal with?
Well, yes and no. The influence is profound to anybody that is a, shall we say, serious architect, because it's the spirit of it that influences you. But the one thing that is a legal aspect of it is that the lakefront is forever open and free. You can't build your commercial hot dog stand there. Unfortunately, they have these trailers with hot dogs because we all like to eat something once in a while, but but that's the reason.
That's the only limitation. You talked about parks and boulevards in the further in the city. Do we still respect those? Are we reducing them or?
Well, we have in the city, we have a Department of Planning and Development, and they have the last say on these things. And very often aldermen too have some influence over these things. This is always a battle. It's amazing. I mean, people did propose certain things that are insensitive and they don't always get turned down, but mostly they get criticized to begin with. And others are wonderful proposals that get done and built. But one of the things that the Burnham Plan did do, because they were so interested in making Chicago follow the height restrictions of Paris, not build so many high-rise buildings, which were just emerging at that time when they did that plan. And as you can tell, that didn't stick. It's still happening, and all of us in Chicago are proud of our skyline. Not that it's always, from all angles, the most beautiful, but it has beautiful aspects. Yes. Well, today, of course, it's electricity, but in the early days, they had to light
A fire.
with some, yes, a little fire, and had fuel that would burn a flame. And then they had a lens that rotated, what? A Fresnel lens, yes, and would blink. And when I was navigating or learned to navigate by the stars, there were still all these lighthouses. And I always found it wonderful that I could check what I had just calculated was actually happened, was true, was where we really were. But during World War II, I know there was one of the Canadian islands north of the US, north of Maine. There was I forget now what but there was a lighthouse that was very famous, very big one. But America discontinued running it because they were worried about German U-boats and other attacks from over the water. And I remember in '72 coming back from Europe. I was looking for this because on the chart it still said there's a lighthouse, and I could never find it. But it became now a major beacon that you hear on your radio. And they often broadcast sounds in the Morse code. Da, 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 whatever it is. Yeah.
Celestial navigation, what has become across the spell of cloudy nights, which is not unusual in the ocean.
then you have to make your best guess and you continue through the night on what's called dead reckoning.
Yeah, but it could be for several days.
Yeah, could be. Yes, absolutely. But in the middle of the ocean, that's not a problem. But usually when you come near the shores, you worry about these things. I will tell you that in 1972, with a friend of mine who I was not the skipper, I was just the navigator. But we crossed the ocean in a race. It was a race, international race. And there was a boat from the United States Naval Academy in Annapolis with young Navy sailors on board. And because it was just the time when some of it was still done by celestial navigation and some of the beacons could already be used. I would think, I never checked it out, but that the Navy had the latest equipment. But in all modesty, I have to tell you, I beat them by a few hours.
How long did it take you to go across the ocean?
Well, the trip would be 4 weeks if you went from Newport directly to the land in Portugal. But I stopped in Bermuda for a week and then in the Azores. So it was a stepping process, and I flew back to Chicago to do some serious work.
It's not a question, but this burning plan you referred to, I've read a copy because I've heard about it, and then I went to the municipal library. It's a reference library. And there it is, the published plan, page by page.
Yes.
Just as you described it, colored and.
Yes.
It's
It's a
amazing.
wonderful, it's a wonderful book. I found it somewhere over the 50 years ago or so in a bookstore, and I bought one. So I have one of the original editions. Yes.
So. Sailing. Much like, I'm just curious.
Well, I don't do it much anymore,
Oh,
regretfully, but I'm too old to pull all these lines.
at the end of Navy Pier,
Occasionally, I
my suggestion was you were talking about the extent of Navy Pier.
Yeah.
And, the MAC race.
Yeah.
Is your head as you start, right?
Yeah.
Because it started off of Navy Pier and then went right up the coastline, so people could see the MAC coast. So I'm just curious if Sail GP is continuing to come back here. When I went there, or we went there a couple times, that area is very uncomfortable if you're trying to watch any kind of sailboat races, so.
from the end of Navy Pier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the idea of having like a maritime museum, which also like has some sort of like sporting aspect to it, to watch people sail.
But I think it would be a little better on the second floor.
Sail GP.
That's a 2-story building there.
What's Sail GP?
It's a race.
What's GP?
The boiling symptoms. Probably green.
Yeah, green, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Well, for your information, just so you know, I'm an old goat. I've done 29 Mackinac races.
Sure, tell them Valeria's won it a few times and was built for that, and also to cruise the Bahamas with a keel centerboard.
Correct. Have you been on it?
A few times,
Yeah,
and I knew the stockers very well.
yeah. I sold the boat on the East Coast to a Frenchman from Saint-Tropez in France. And they still have it, and they have a website. You can look up the name and read what they eat. The French chefs are very good.
Well, Dirk, you can also brag that the boat was built by Abbott
And Rasmussen, correctly. My goodness, you know everything. Yes, you're correct, in Bremerhaven. And was designed by Olin Stevens in New York, the famous yacht designer. But they built it in Germany because in those days, Germany was cheap and the dollar was strong and big, and the quality was good.
I think we have one last question online.
A question from Rex. Did the reversal of the flow of the Chicago River have any effects on the existing maritime structures? This will be for your time.
That's a very good question. As far as I know, relatively little, because the canals were built all at the same time, and the flow of the river, because of it's such flat land here, never is very fast. It's slow. When you look out the window here, you don't even see that it's moving. It seems to be standing still. But so I would say it didn't have a real effect that, shall we say, the structures are endangered because of the reverse flow. No, not really. Thank you very much.
It's fantastic. Now, as Mr. Lohan mentioned, it is hard to get people down to Bridgeport. So I hope you will all go back to your lives and tell your friends and family that they need to come down to the Chicago Maritime Museum in the next month or so to see our temporary exhibition, Maritime Midwest Modern. It's coming down after Open House Chicago weekend. The last day to see it is October 19th. So bring your friends, tell your friends, and thank you again to Mr. Dirk Lohan.
Thank you very much.